Guys, I'd like to make, most of the time when I do this, when we get going, we're rolling pretty good, but at the same time, we like to do it as informally as possible. I want everybody to feel like I'm just one of the guys at your school and we're talking ball, and if you have a question, please stop and ask. If you would like for me to answer a question about something that's a little bit different than even what we're talking about, I'd be more than happy to do that. First of all, I'd like to let each and every one of you know that Michigan State's not that far away from here, probably 3.5 or 4 hours, depending on where you're coming from. It's our philosophy, my philosophy, and our staff's philosophy that we would like to give back any way that we can to the people that help develop our program, which I think the high school coaches, wherever they are, certainly do that. I think you guys do the best job of coaching of anybody at any level. So therefore, we'd like to give back to you. I've been coaching this game for 22 or 23 years now and have never invented one idea, one philosophy, or one technique. Some player or some coach somewhere along the line gave me the idea to do it that way. And we've always been very open about trying to help and develop professionalism and professionals in this profession. So if you ever want to come and visit us, don't hesitate. We'd love to have you. The first thing I'm going to talk about, guys, is attitude development of a team, of a defensive team, whatever. And I think this is very, very important. And I think you need to know that I've given this talk to the Mid-American Conference, to the Big Ten best defense in the United States, to the Cleveland Browns team that gave up the 6th fewest points of any team in the history of the National Football League 2 years ago. And it's always the same, no matter what the level is. And I think my coach gave it to me when I was 10 years old, and that's where it all started, at Pop Warner football in some coal mining town in West Virginia where I grew up. But this is what I believe, this is what I've always talked, whether it's as a head coach to the whole team or to the defensive team, regardless. First of all, teamwork is the essence of being successful. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think the first thing you have to do is you have to have a way and a philosophy of how you're going to instill in the players getting them to want to do it. How do you go about doing that? What's going to make that happen for them? What's going to make them want to do it? And I think that's really, really important. And I think you have to get people to make commitments to what you want them to accomplish, to what has got to be important for them to accomplish. When we go recruiting, I look for basically one real important ingredient in any young man, and that's what his character is. And to me, character is what you do when no one else is around. What kind of decision and judgment do you make when nobody's watching you? And that's important. That's really important, I think. Now, it takes a certain amount of self-discipline to have character. It takes a certain amount of self-discipline to be a successful person, because you have to have self-discipline to have character. You have to have character to be successful, because you're going to have to make some judgments. We can't control all the judgments that they make. I've never seen anybody be successful that doesn't know what they want to accomplish. Never ever have, never ever will. And I came from a place where if you ask a guy, what is your goal in life? He says, I just want to buy a new pickup truck. That's what I came from. That's exactly, everybody worked in the coal mine. I made a D in music when I was in the 8th grade. My dad took my basketball uniform, carried it down to the coach, gave it to the coach, took me by the hand, and took me 550 feet down the shaft and said, you're never going to participate in sports because you got a D. If you continue to get D's in school, this is where you're going to end up. And when that baby opened up 550 feet deep, I said, I'm making no more D's. And I never made a D ever again in my life. And that probably turned me around for what I wanted to do and what I was going to accomplish, because I wasn't going to work in that hole every day. But there was a unique way that my dad, in that example, made me aware of what needed to be important to me. Now, I just tell all the players, you make the commitments to what you want to accomplish. As an individual, you have to know what you want to accomplish to be successful. Once you know that, and it's important to you, then that desire that you have to do it is going to give you the willingness to work and invest your time, to stick with it, overcome adversity that you have along the way, be persistent, learn from the mistake that you have, which I think is very, very important to us as coaches. kids have to have the attitude that the criticism that you give them, the coaching, the teaching, whatever you want to call it, whether it's positive reinforcement, and I think we all need to find ways to do that, or it's negative, that they need to know that what you're telling them is with their best interest, for their well-being. It's only to make them better. That's what I told every pro player, because in pro ball you got to be a psychiatrist to coach them. You got a guy making $3 million a year, you're making $200,000 a year. You know if the shit comes down to it, you're going to get fired before he gets fired. But you got to get that guy to do it, or you're going to get fired too. So how do you motivate that guy? What do you tell him? How do you get him to do it? You make him make some commitments to some things that are important to him. You find out what's important to him, get him to commit to it, and then you got an opportunity to do it. But getting people to learn from their mistakes and find the positive seed of whatever it is that can be learned from the mistake that they make is very, very important. And I always tell our coaches to coach for the next play. If you're yelling and screaming at a guy and confronting that guy for what he did on the last play, and you're really just ripping him for what he did on the last play, if what you're doing is not going to help him play better on the next play, then you're not a very good coach, in my opinion. Because you always coach and teach for the next play. You always want the guy to learn from the experience that he just had so he plays the next play better. And if you continue to do that, and that will make you a good coach, because your coaching will actually be reflected in what the players do on the field, because they want to do it, they're working to do it, now you're teaching them to do it, and every time they make a mistake, they're learning something from it and getting better. And they're persistent in sticking with it. Now, if we're going to be successful athletically, whether it's at Michigan State or whatever school you're at, there's going to be a certain amount of adversity that you're going to have to overcome all the time. And I don't think you can really have any great victories unless you have adversity. I really don't think that at all. And I think that comes on an individual basis and it comes on a team basis. When I was at Ohio State in 1981, Michigan had a great football team. And we were going to play them the last game of the year as always. And Woody Hayes was not the coach. I coached there for Earl Bruce. But Woody was still around. He was just out of coaching for a couple, 3 years at that time. And he came and talked to our team and gave the best talk that I've ever heard any coach ever give to a team. And we were 17-point underdogs. Michigan was 1, 2, or 3 in the country. I don't know. I just remember they had 5 All-Americans on offense: Anthony Carter, Butch Woolfolk, Bubba Parris, Becker. I can't remember them all. But they had a hell of an offensive football team. We were 17-point underdogs. I think they were undefeated in the league, but they needed to beat us to go to the Rose Bowl. Woody gave the team and talked to the team about how bad the weather was, how cold it was, all the negatives, 17-point underdogs, all their great players, all of our young defensive team that had been kind of ridiculed for the whole year because they hadn't played as well as the Ohio State tradition, went through all these negative things about why we should lose the game, that we had an excuse to lose the game, and why. And he equated those things all to adversity and adversities to be overcome. And he equated it to the war in the Pacific that we won. And it was such a great victory because we had all these things to overcome. Now, I'm no history buff, and I can't remember all the things that he talked about, but I thought that was a great example of taking a negative situation. We were going to Michigan, 20-some degrees out, snowing, 17-point underdogs, had a young team, about 9 sophomores starting on defense, against a great offensive football team and a much better team overall, and turned it around for the players to be a very positive thing, that the only way this can be a great game and a great victory for us is because there's so much adversity involved to overcome. Because you can have no great victories unless you have tremendous amount of adversity. So I thought it was a real neat way to package that. We won the game, 14-9, and we got screwed because no one thought we'd win, and we didn't even have a good bowl game to go to, because all the bowl scenarios were if Michigan won and we lost, we both got to go to really good games. But there's another part of that I think, especially if you're in a program that has not been successful, and this was definitely true with our team this year, and I'm talking about individuals now, is that people have a tremendous kind of a habit or whatever to put self-imposed limitations on what they can accomplish. I think it comes from a little lack of confidence. It comes from having some doubt about what they can accomplish, and I refer to it as self-imposed limitations. And the first time I was made aware of it is I had a friend that I grew up with in West Virginia who went to Vietnam, and he was the best free safety. I mean, when he smacked them underneath the chin, their helmet popped up in the air 10 yards. And he wasn't a big guy. He weighed about 175 pounds, but he was a point man in Vietnam for 2 or 3 years. And he was the kind of guy that would chase those Vietnamese down, cut their fingers off, wearing them on his belt, and all that kind of stuff. Well, he got captured after he was over there for about 1.5 years, and he was put in a cage about as big as this podium here. And the reason they put him in a cage is they didn't have any prisoner of war camps in some of the places that catch these guys, so they could transport them around when they stayed on the move all the time. And they called these things tiger cages, a little cage like this. And he said it was the most restrictive. He felt so limited and very imposing to do anything. And the only thing that was important was to survive. And they would stick them down in rivers and all kind of stuff, and the rats would get them, and it was just terrible. And then when he finally got out of that and he came back, he realized that, hey, whatever you had to do and whatever you had to overcome, you could remove all the limitations you had on your own self and make yourself do it. And he said, I watch people here now at home in the United States have it so good and have so many limitations on what they can do because they just don't think they can. And that experience made him realize what you really could do if you had to do it. Well, let's don't say you have to do it. Let's just say, I want to do it, I can do it, what can I get done? And that's basically what we're talking about in athletics. The kids don't even have to do it. So you really got to talk to them about removing some of those, and that's confidence, it's believing in themselves, and I think that's very, very important to being successful. I don't think there's any question about that. Another example of that was I saw a guy fishing once, and he would catch big fish and throw them back and keep little fish. And I finally went to the guy and I said, hey buddy, I can't understand why you would throw the big fish back and keep the little fish. He said, I only had a 9-inch frying pan, so I only keep what'll fit in the pan. Well, to me, that's self-imposed limitations. That's an example of a guy that only can accomplish so much because he's put a limit on what he can accomplish. And I think we all do that now. I've been guilty of it myself. And I know our football team last year at Michigan State did not think they could beat Nebraska. And they played okay for a while. And then they really kind of quit in the game. And I don't think they thought they could win at all, period. And then as a team, there was a lot of things that they had to overcome along the way and learn, which we'll talk about some of that as well. But having that belief in yourself, knowing what you want to accomplish, having the willingness to work, to persevere, to overcome adversity, and then to have the confidence to remove all the limitations you put on yourself as to what you really can accomplish are all, to me, important in building individual character. And I think you have to confront and demand the players. I'm going to tell you a story, and maybe this will bring it clear to you as to how I think you need to get the players to make these decisions about what they accomplish. You can't want them to do it. You got to get them to want them to do it. I went to San Diego State. I worked out every defensive player we ever drafted or had on the draft board in Cleveland for the draft. I went to San Diego State the very first year I was there, and they had a defensive lineman named Pio Sagapulatelli. He was a Hawaiian guy that grew up in a ghetto in Honolulu. And you really couldn't get anybody at San Diego State to say anything good about this guy. And he's about 6'6", 300 pounds. He played extremely well out in the Hula Bowl. He had great push, lots of natural strength. But you could not get anybody there to say anything good about him. In fact, when I went to the strength coach and I said, well, tell me about Pio Sagapulatelli. I mean, what kind of guy is he? He says, I can tell you this, Coach. He says, if he was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him to put it out. That's how much I think of him. So that's about as bad as an endorsement that anybody could ever give to a football player. And I said, well, why is that? And he says, well, he fights on the field. We can't have practice. He won't lift weights. He doesn't do what the coaches say. He's just a bad guy. So I worked this kid out at San Diego State, and then afterwards I sat down and talked to him, and I said, you know, no one really says much good about you here. They say you're a bad guy. You don't have any self-discipline. You can't have practice. You know, why do you think that I should go back to Cleveland and endorse you as a player that we should draft? And he really couldn't give me an answer for that. And he said, but Coach, I really want to play professional football. He says, I really, really want to. That's something I've always wanted to do. And I said, yeah, but you refused to make any sacrifices here to be able to do it, and now the people here won't endorse you enough for me to even go back and be able to recommend that we have you on the team. And he says, Coach, I'll do whatever you say. I said, okay, that's the opening. I said, look, I'll go back and say that if we draft you in Cleveland, I'll go back and endorse your character. Stand on the table and say, well, you know, the guy can play. And I'm not worried about his character. If you say that you'll come, you'll work, and you'll never defy any person in authority in the organization. You'll never give the strength coach any problem. You'll never get in a fight on the field, lose your temper, and become an individual, selfish person that only is interested in the little battle that he has going on rather than what's important for the team. None of these things can you do if I come there. Now, you make that commitment to me, and you shake my hand and look me in the eye and say you'll do it, then I'll go back and endorse your character. Now, this is the first time I'd ever done this. So I was dumb enough to do it. He said he'd do it. He's still there on their team after 5 years. He's never been a star player for them. Always been a good player, and they've never had any problem with him. Never did I even once have to ever sit down in 4 years of being there with him and talk to him about how he acted, what his character was, what his work habits were, or anything else. And nobody in that organization has ever seen him as a problem. And the strength coach at San Diego State says, if the guy was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him to put it out. Now, that's as bad as an endorsement as anybody has ever given me about a player. But because I showed a little confidence in the guy, made him make a commitment to doing certain things, and then he used that guideline and did it, and he's been fairly successful in the National Football League. And that's all it took for him because he had the ability to do it. But I think those are some individual things you have to do to motivate people. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, there's three things that I've always required of the players. Individual things again. And they're all intangibles. They don't take they don't take any ability. I've always told players that you can do three things. And I don't care if it was Michael Dean Perry, who was making $3 million a year, or some walk-on from wherever on our football team at Michigan State right now. First thing you can do is give effort. It doesn't take any ability to give 100% effort. And you say, oh, that's a simple thing, Coach. But I'm going to tell you what, I'll take your film, you take our film. You take our film at Michigan State, you take our film at the Cleveland Browns, you take any team that we ever coached. Take our team in 1987 at Michigan State, the Big Ten championship team, the best defense in the country. Take that team and look at it. You'll find a player loafing on that film every down. Every down. And those teams gave as good an effort as anybody at their level at the time. Our team in Cleveland 2 years ago, whatever year that was, 1994 defensive team, everybody in the league thought it was a really high-intensity group. And you'd have trouble finding a play where everybody was going 100% for every play, the whole play. But that's an intangible that it doesn't take any ability to give effort. The second thing is to have mental and physical toughness. You cannot play defensive football if you're not mentally and physically tough. You just can't do it. And to me, toughness doesn't come from ability, it comes from an attitude. And mental toughness also comes from an attitude. And that may be more important in some ways than even physical toughness. And the third thing is you have to know what to do. Know what your job is. understand what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it, and why it's important for you to do what the coach wants you to do. That takes no ability. We had 2 middle linebackers at Michigan State when I was there before. Totally and completely different in style of player and personality. The first one was Shane Bullock. His dad, Henry, Hank, however you know him, was a great defensive coordinator in the National Football League for, I don't know, 16 or 17 years. Kid was smart, had about a 3.8 in school. He was about 6 foot tall, weighed about 215 pounds, probably ran 5 flat, and was a very productive player. Led the Big Ten in tackles at that ability level because he was smart and ran the defense, got us in the right things all the time, right coverages, did everything exactly like you coach him to do it. He graduated. Percy Snow came in. Percy Snow won the Butkus Outland first-round pick at Kansas City. Not nearly as bright a guy in terms of just natural intelligence. Had a lot of ability. Played hard. Hateful attitude. Tougher than shit. Hateful. Just every day when he got up, he wanted to smash your ass. But he had more pride in his work than just about any player that I've ever coached. And when we went over the game plan and we played a lot of automatic fronts and coverages in those days, he spent whatever time it took before he went on the field to make sure that he never got embarrassed in front of his peers, that he couldn't make every call exactly like he was supposed to. And he actually ran the defense and had command of the team on the field just as well as Shane Bullock did before him, for 100% different reason, because of the pride that he had in his what he wanted to do as a person. So he functioned at an intellectual level that was just as good as the smartest guy I ever coached the position, but it was for a different reason. And he knew how important it was for him to take over that team and them to have confidence that he knew what they were supposed to do. Now, that's the only way, to me, you can play team defense, if guys know what they're supposed to do, how they do it, and all that type of thing. It's the only way. Now, I think you have to set goals for your team. Now we're into team stuff to be successful. Because I said teamwork is the essence of life for us as coaches. There's no question. Now, I've talked about a little bit of individual motivation. All right, now we're talking about team stuff. Now, you cannot have a team unless you talk to your team about suppressing their own personal ego for the good of the team. You can't have one. You can't have a team. The team will never have a personality and enthusiasm of its own if you have a bunch of selfish people playing. It just can't happen. And they have to give that up, and it's got to be more important to the players on your team that they're a part of the team's success than they are an indispensable part of the team, if that makes any sense to you. I tell our players this all the time. The guy that wants to spike the ball in the end zone and jump up and down and high step and all that shit and bring all the attention to themselves when they do something good rather than the teammates that help them do it, that guy's a selfish player. He's playing the game and he wants to do it because he's a selfish player. There's no question about it. Your team can never have a personality, an energy and enthusiasm of its own, unless your players do that. Selfish behavior has got to be put aside. Now, Pat Rowley's book is a very good book about coaching, I think. Maybe some of you read it. But one of the most important things I read in there about this selfish thing, and I just read it to our team and put it up on the wall, is the part that talks about the disease of me. And people who create 20% of the success want 80% of the credit. It starts with that. The disease of me. And here's some indicators of it, and I'm just reading them. Inexperience in dealing with success. Our team last year, we didn't think we could beat Nebraska. We thought we could beat Louisville. We pounded them and played them very, very well and won in a lopsided game. And Purdue really didn't have a heck of a lot better team, and we should have been able to do the same to them, but we couldn't practice and prepare the same way 2 weeks in a row because we were inexperienced in dealing with success. And other things became more important. Couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus, couldn't prepare for the next game because we won the last game. That's just all growing up. Chronic feeling of being underappreciated. And I'm going to tell you what, guys. I was an athlete and a competitor, And baseball, basketball, and football, all three sports, made All-State in all three of them. And I'll tell you what, there's very few of these that I didn't feel somewhere along the line when I was a player. Paranoia over being cheated out of what's your rightful share. I got 16 points in this game. My buddy got 14. He got his picture in the paper and his name in the headlines, and I didn't. Resentment against the competence of your partners. You resent that someone else on your team is doing well. Personal effort solely to outshine your teammate. Leadership vacuum resulting from formations of cliques and rivalries. How many times have you seen the guys that aren't playing stand in the back and bullshit and try to make a point that they're not interested in what's going on right now? They're not going to be a part of it. There's other things that are more important to them. Because they're not the center of attention, they don't want to be a part of anything. I tell you what, that does not happen on our team. I mean, I will get right in the middle of that and as fast as you can, in a heartbeat. Because that kind of stuff destroys your team. Because it's a formation of cliques. All right, and this clique has this motive and this goal in mind. And this one over here has some other goal and motive in mind. And you can't have a team because everybody's not moving in the same direction. Everybody's not working toward the same goal. Feeling of frustration even when the team performs successfully. Is there a coach here that has not won a game and gone in the locker room at some point in your coaching career and seen a player disappointed after you won a game? It's happened a dozen times for me. Defensive lineman didn't get a sack. Defensive back didn't make any plays. Running back didn't gain 100 yards. Wide receivers are great for it. Didn't catch any passes in the game. Team played great, but we didn't have to throw the ball to you. So now you know you're going to pout because you didn't catch enough balls. Has anybody ever coached in their career and not seen that happen? Happens all the time. I don't think you can let it happen, and I think when it happens, I don't think you have to mount a guy in front of everybody, but I think you should talk to them about it and make people realize that they are being selfish, that they are being self-centered, which is it's a natural thing to do, and in this day and age, it's more that way than it's ever been before. My children are 5 and 9, and I promise you they're a lot more selfish and self-centered because of what they have and what they're given than what I was when I grew up. Yes?
What if he's frustrated because he felt like he didn't play well?
Well, I think that's okay, as long as he thinks it, because if the reason that he wants to play well is for the team's success and not for his own individual gratification. Even though there's a fine line in there between all that. But I think a player can feel bad that he didn't play, but he still should be happy that the team won because that's the goal. The goal should be to win the game. That's the fun of it all. And then I would tell that player, hey, I know you had a tough day out there today. You got beat a couple times or whatever, playing right corner. But, hey, we won the game. Feel good about it. We'll get it fixed tomorrow. That's the way I would handle it with a guy. And I don't mean you got to confront all these things all the time, you know, in a real negative way. Some way, guys, this is another point now, but that's kind of my deal on teamwork. And I watch for those things like a hawk. I mean, I'll watch for them like a hawk. Because I tell you what, the society we live in now is full of front runners and people who do very, very well when things are going well. And people that have this selfish attitude will do that, and as soon as things go badly, they will cut themselves from the herd. Immediately. I'm not associated with that. You can't have that. You cannot have that. Absolutely cannot have that. You have to find a way in your program, guys, to reinforce positive behavior. You have to reinforce positive behavior. You have to find ways to do it. You have to. You cannot always be a negative coach because that's the nature of coaching, is to be a critic. But players respond a lot better, everyone responds a lot better to positive reinforcement. I mean, those pigeons did for Skinner, however many years ago that was, all right, when they pecked and the thing came out. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I think sometimes you got to get on people, and if any of you have ever seen me coach, you know I can get on them with the best of them, and I believe in it. Confront and demand. There's no question about that. But I tell you what, every now and then I want somebody standing behind me saying, how many good things did you say and how many bad things did you say? And did you always say a good thing before you said a bad thing to a player unless he didn't deserve it? And when they really get mounted with me is when they don't do one of the big three that I talked to you about before. The effort, the toughness, knowing what they're supposed to do. Those things. If they're trying, then you got to teach them. And it's better to teach them and reinforce in a positive way. Something that we used in Cleveland was a production chart for defensive players. And it was a real simple system. But I tell you what, you walked in our meeting room and it was a theater-style meeting room, and I had that right there where that mirror is. When they walked in the door, the first place everybody's eyes went was to see who was on the top of the chart. It did a couple things. The guys that buffaloed the team, that they were great players and didn't have any production, the team didn't think they were great players anymore. The two guys that were on the top of that board the whole year were Pepper Johnson and Eric Turner, and they were the two leaders of the defensive team. And everybody looked up to those two players and because they were reinforced and recognized, and they didn't have any problems being leaders because of their performance and production. But it's a real simple point system, guys. For a tackle, you get 2 points. For an assist, you get 1. Interception, you get 3. Cause a fumble, you get 3. Recover a fumble, you get 3. Get a big hit, you get an extra point. So the tackle's worth more. You get a sack, tackle for a loss, you get an extra point. All right, now to reinforce it the other way, though, if you miss a tackle, you get -2. If you get a no hustle or a loaf, you get a -1. If you get an ME, which is a mental error, you get -1. If you get a penalty, you get -2. So you have a way to go through the game, and a guy got 24 production points. He got 8 tackles, 4 assists, had 2 loafs, got an interception, batted a ball down. I used to give him 1 for that. And let me tell you about grading, since I'm talking about team defense here now. If you grade and you tell players that if they grade a certain percentage, they have a winning performance, you're not promoting team defense. And I'm going to tell you how this happened. The first year in 1983, we're at Michigan State. We go to Illinois. Mike White was there. They had a good team. They were throwing the ball and all that stuff. And we didn't have a real good team. And we got beat bad, like 40-13 or something. We come back the next day. We're grading the film. We grade the film. We give the grades out, watch the film, critique it. And I'm in the outside linebacker meeting, and the guys come out of the room, and this outside linebacker, I won't mention his name, says, hey, I graded 92%. I had a winning performance. And it just dawned on me, how can anybody walk out of this room watching this game and think we had anybody on our whole team that played with a winning performance, when the whole goal should be, number one, for the team to win? And I said, there's something wrong with this, that if a consistency grade gives the guy the right to think he had a winning performance, so what's that guy naturally do? He walks out of the room and says, I played well enough for us to win, so let's get the other 21 guys straightened out and we'll have a good team. Now, is that promoting team or not? I don't think so. So we still grade. I'm not saying we don't grade. We grade. We give consistency grades, but that's what they are. They're consistency grades. They're technique grades, and that's it. And you've all coached a guy that makes high grades but doesn't ever make any plays and has no production. And you could even give a guy points for a good consistency grade if you wanted to in this production chart. But the guys that make plays, especially on defense, are the guys that usually win football games for you. Not the one that plays his technique exactly right every time and never makes a tackle. The other thing that I think will help promote team defense for you is, how do you evaluate the success and failure rate of your defensive team? How do you do that? The way I've always done this is to take every down and distance in the game, 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 3 and more. And I say those are the breaking points on defense for us to have the advantage on the next down. So we either win or lose the down to say that we're there. In other words, it's 1st and 10. They run a toss sweep to the right. Carl Banks is playing outside linebacker. He gets hooked. He's number 58. And 29 is a strong safety. He gets cut. The ball bounces outside at 2nd and 5. All right, now we had 9 other guys on that play. I mean, the nose flat-headed to center, knocked his ass back and two-gapped him and steered him and ran to the ball. The 5 technique did the same thing. Pepper did the same. Everybody did the same thing. Those 2 guys. One guy got hooked, and the other guy lost contain. I don't get personal. 58 got hooked. 29 lost contain. That's it. That's why it's 2nd and 5. Your other 9 guys did what you were supposed to do. Everybody did what they were supposed to do. Now, what that does is it shows you watching the film, and you say, all right, this is a loss for us, guys. We gave up 5 yards here. What it makes everybody see that if 58 didn't get hooked and 29 just put a stone out there, this ball cap made the guy run inside the ball cap, we wouldn't gain any yards. I need anybody to be a superhero here. Just play the team concept and the team defense. And then, if we can't put the defense up there and show them that they can have success in it if everybody did what they were supposed to do, then we'll throw that defense out and I'll never call it again. That's what I always told the players. Now, you talk about watching it, and I don't care what it was. They started playing it, played it, believed in the technique that you were teaching them, saw it be successful, saw if they all did what they were supposed to, they could be successful, and it reinforced every point that I've talked about so far today. Every point. 2nd and 7, make it 3rd and 3 or more. Because we got a chance to stop them now. We're creating situations in the game for us to make plays on defense, and when we make it, put the down and distance in our favor. If it's 3rd down and 20, what's a win? 4th and 1. If they complete the 19-yard pass and punt, that's a victory for the defense. It's not a loss. And it makes the players very aware of the situation in the game. Because they approach the game on a play-by-play basis. So that's the way we've always done that. Now, one thing I didn't tell you was we always have goals on defense. And these have been the goals. And look, the first year I was in Cleveland, I took everything that you could take, and there's more stats in the NFL than you can shake a stick at. There's a book this thick of them at the end of the year. Everything that had any significance to winning, I felt, offensively or defensively. And I said, okay, these are the things, and I didn't want to have too many, because I'm kind of one of those guys that, not really a simple-minded coach, but think if you emphasize 100 things that people will only get 4 or 5 of them or 2 or 3 of them or whatever. So you can't have too many. So we have 8. The first one is to win the game. And being around a lot of good defensive football teams, I've never ever been in a situation as a defensive coordinator or a head coach where one unit thought they were superior to the other and pointed the finger at the other unit. And I think as a defensive coach, that's easy to do if you have a bad offense and you have a good defense. The defensive players start pointing the finger at the offense. You guys aren't getting it done. You're not scoring any points. We're getting beat 3-0, whatever. But when you make the first goal win, then that can never be. And I always tell the defensive players, look, some days we can give up 40 and win, and some days we can't give up any and win. But the object of the game is to win. Because you win as a team and you lose as a team. They don't say the defense won the day and the offense lost or vice versa. They just say Michigan State lost. Don't get any points for playing good on defense. So that's got to be the first goal. The number one criteria of playing good defense is to prevent the score. All right, so whatever it is that tells you is good, then for defense at your level, then you put that as the goal. I think 13 points is good at our level. I think there's only one team in the Big Ten that gave up fewer points than that. I think the rules in college football right now really favor the offensive team. Guys can go downfield and block on passes and screens, and it's just, you know, I mean, it's tough to play that well. But whatever it is, maybe it's 7 points in high school. I don't know for sure what it is, but preventing the score has got to be emphasized. And then here are the things, I think, that keep the team from scoring. First of all, you got to stop the run. If you don't stop the run, you've got no chance to win. And I'm sure it's even more true at the high school level than it is at our level. But you have no chance to win. And I don't say 150 yards or less than 100 yards a game or whatever, like I've heard a lot of coaches say. You take the running football plays in the game and you divide it out. They gained 100 yards in 30 attempts. What's that go into it? 3.3, and less than that is good rush defense. That's as simple as that. If they're in the wishbone and they run it 100 times, you're going to give up some yards. But if you give up 250 yards rushing, that's only 2.5 yards of rush. That's good defense against the wishbone, even though it's 250 yards rushing. Pass plays. To me, the way the stats are, crazy. If it's a pass play, it's a pass play. So if the guy gets sacked, it comes off the passing yardage, and you have to do it that way. That's to do this stat the way I'm talking about, and you give up 5 yards or less per attempt passing. That's sacks, incompletes, interceptions, completions, the whole thing. In other words, a guy threw the ball 40 times for 200 yards. That's a flat 5-0 for the day. That's not bad pass defense. And I know we've all been conditioned to say they got 300 yards passing. How could they get 300 yards passing? Well, if they threw it 85 times, they can get 300 yards passing. If they can pass it all and catch. And you may not have been in games like that, but I have. I've been in games where the guy dropped back 95 times. Turnovers. One of the most significant things in football and winning and losing is turnover ratio. So for your defensive team to get turnovers and your offensive team not to give them up is going to be very significant in your success and failure as a team. So to get turnovers on defense is big. No big plays. If you're going to be hard to score against, you can't give up big runs and big passes if you're going to be hard to score against. You make the team march the ball. And that's the whole theory. You know, special teams controls the vertical field position in the game. That's what that should be your number one goal of your special teams. Control the vertical field position in the game. What's a net punt? How many turnovers can we get in special teams? Where do we make them start when we kick it off to them? Where do we start when we get it? The worst thing that can happen to you in a football game, and I don't want to get off on the special teams tangent, guys, is you're playing away and you're in Indianapolis or Seattle and you can't hear yourself think, and you're winning the game and in total control and everybody's sitting on their hands. They score, they kick it off to you, they splatter you on the kickoff return, and the ball goes and they get it again. It's done. For the rest of the day, you're on the silent count. You can't hear the snap count. It's over. So, and that's a big play because what kind of vertical field position did you control with your kickoff return? They got the ball back on the 15-yard line. My first decision as a head coach against Nebraska this year was we got a good offensive team, not a very good defensive team, personnel-wise at least, so we're going to receive the ball if we win the toss at Nebraska. What happens? Got splattered on the opening kickoff and the ball went flying and they got on the 15-yard line. It was bad coaching. All right, but big plays, no big plays. You can't give up big plays, and if you're on offense, you always need to make them. Third down. People have to be aware of third down. And when I was a college coach, I was never that aware of third down. But you go through first down, and we practice too much of first down and regular down defense and don't practice enough situation defense. I'm convinced of that. Because first down is only a minimal part of the game, but if you think about how you practice, I bet you practice that part of the game 70% of the time. But third down efficiency, to get off the field when you make it third down and whatever, and only let them convert 30% of the time, that means you're getting off the field. And I'm going to tell you, in the NFL, if you can't get off the field on third down, I don't care how good a defense you are, you give those players enough chances, they're eventually going to make enough plays to beat you. But if you get them to third down and you get out and you get off and get your players off the field, that's part of playing good defense too. Red area efficiency. If you can 60% of the time when a team gets to the 20-yard line, 60% of the time, you get out of that without giving up a touchdown. And all 4 years in Cleveland, we were above that and in the top 3 in the league. And at one point, we went 15 quarters, which I think is a record, without giving up a touchdown. 15 straight quarters without giving up a touchdown because of how we played in the red area. And how much do you practice in the red area? And you can't really, as a defensive coach, if you play your coverages the same in the red area, the field's different. There's no vertical stretch. If you don't change the techniques and play closer and teach your players how to play, then I don't think you're giving them the best chance to be successful. You got to get them closer to the line. It should be harder for them to run the ball. You got no depth of the field to defend. But that's a clinic in itself to talk about red area efficiency. But I think those things are the most significant things. Like you talk about sacks. I looked at all the teams that had the most sacks. They didn't play good defense. They didn't play good defense. The teams that powered the pocket in the middle and the quarterback could never step up and throw it, they played good defense. But the guys that were just trying to sack the quarterback all the time and getting pushed by half the time, the worst thing that can ever happen to you as a defense is to have a pass rusher get pushed by the quarterback. Because now you're playing with how many guys? 10. You only got 10 guys defending where that guy's looking. So there's just a couple other things I'm going to bring up to you guys, and they're giving me the high sign here. But I think I kind of skipped around a little bit more than I usually do, but getting back to this team thing. You have to have organizational values and principles as what's important on your team. Then you have to have integrity to stick to those principles. And I think players will respect that in you. Those principles and values give your team direction. And your team needs direction. That's your roadmap. That's your roadmap. They're all looking for it, man. How do we get there? They all want to know. And if you can show them the way, they'll believe in you and do it. Now, you can't do it without discipline, so don't think you can take a shortcut and not do it without discipline. Direction and discipline will give the players what they need to succeed. I really believe that. People talk about integrity all the time. But you can't have integrity if you don't have principles and values in your organization. What do you have integrity to? What do the players have integrity to? You can't have it. You've got to know your enemy, which to me is preparation. But you've got to know yourself too, so that you do the right things for your team to win, so that you have the right players doing the things that they can do best to give you the best opportunity to win. My old coach used to say all the time, it's not holding a good hand, but how you play a bad hand that really will make you successful. Because you're not always going to get good cards. And I like playing cards. So that's really important in success. My high school coach, I'm going to tell you this one story. I learned this a long time ago. There's no reporters in here, right? Because I got in trouble for this once. Because it ended up in the paper. When I was 15 years old, I was a sophomore quarterback at a school that had won 33 football games in a row. And it was a little town in West Virginia, and it wasn't as good a ball as you have in Chicago probably. Probably wasn't as good as ball as they play in Canton, Ohio either. All right, but relative to that area and what I knew, it was good ball. We were playing a team that we were third in the state, they were fifth in the state. In those days, the first two teams went to the championship and played. My high school coach was the coach of the year, I can't tell you how many times. He's in the state coaches hall of fame and all that stuff. And he was a great coach. But as a 15-year-old sophomore, I called all the plays. Not because I was capable. Any quarterback that he coached called the plays. We were in this game with this team, and we were playing at Masontown Valley. Bad lights, bad bleachers, graveyard in the end zone, bad locker rooms, that's just the way it was. And it looked like a great stadium to me because that's all I'd ever seen. Scores tied 12-12. And we go we're behind 18-12. We get the ball back with about 2 minutes. We go 2 minutes. We go down. It's 4th down and 10 on our own 25. There's 20 seconds to go. So this is the last play of the game to us if we don't make a first down. And it may be the last play because he decides to call timeout, and that's our last timeout. And the clock didn't stop when they moved the chains in those days, which I hate that too, but that's another topic. So I'm totally relieved as a high school quarterback that this coach is going to make this call on 4th and 10 to win the game, to go to the state championship and all that stuff. I run over to the sidelines and say, "What do you think, Coach?" He says, "I don't know. What do you think?" I says, "Hell, why'd you call timeout if you're not going to call the play?" He says, "I'm not going to call the play. You call all the plays all year. You call this play." He says, "I'm just going to tell you this. You have a right halfback out there that's the fastest guy in the state, and this guy was a good football player. He made All-American at West Virginia later on. He was a sophomore at the time. And you got an all-state split end who was a first-round draft choice of the Chicago Cubs, never made it to the big leagues, playing split end. And when this play's over, I don't care what you call, I want to see the ball in one of the two of their hands." I said, "Okay." And this is true. This is happening on the sidelines with the graveyard in the end zone. So I play actioned it, man. 4th and 10 to win the game. Faked it to the right halfback, threw it to the split end. It was a touchdown. We won the game and ended up winning the state championship. After the game, he came up to me and he said, "Do you know why that was important to do that way, or why I gave you the opportunity to do that?" And I said, "No, I really don't. I just wanted you to call the play." And he said, "Well, it doesn't make any difference what play you call in a situation like that, because in a situation like that, you don't think of plays, you think of players. Because the best players on the field will make the best plays to win the game." So I always remember that. When we went 104 yards against Michigan, and it was 104 because we got a 15-yard penalty for a dead ball foul, which doesn't say much about the discipline that we've been talking about. But we had 3 guys that are going to get drafted and 2 guys that will get drafted on offense next year. 5 draft choices on the offensive football team. Not one guy other than those 5 guys touched the ball in those 15 plays. We played my last professional football game in Pittsburgh January 9th a year ago. AFC playoff. $40,000 game to me and our players for playoff money. Bill Belichick is a great coach, most prepared guy I've ever been around, over-prepares the team, over-analyzes everything, but does a hell of a job as a coach. We have a meeting the night before the game, and he says, we always have a meeting with the coaches. He says, goes through the defense. He says, the reason that we've lost twice to Pittsburgh, now we were 12-5 in that season. We lost 3 games to Pittsburgh. And this is the 3rd one. He says, the reason that we lost the first 2 games to Pittsburgh and we lost 2017 and 14-10 was we've had 9 turnovers as an offensive team, and we only got 1 turnover away from them on defense. So we're -8 turnovers in 2 games. And we should have won both games or could have won both games. They were very close games, but we lost. And furthermore, the 2 guys that had all the turnovers were Eric Metcalf and Leroy Hort, which are our 2 best offensive players. So in Bill's deduction, he tells the offense, I don't want those 2 guys to have the ball in the first half of the game. Don't run them. Run Ernest Biner. Do whatever you got to do. I don't want Metcalf returning punts. I said, wait a while now. The last time we beat these guys in Pittsburgh a couple years ago, Metcalf had a 91-yard touchdown punt return and a 75-yard punt return. We won the game 28-24. He says, I don't care. If they're not in there, they won't turn the ball over. And I'm thinking to my old high school coach, where are you now? Because the 2 guys that are going to give us the best chance to win the game, we're not going to give them the ball. And we didn't. And we were behind about 21-0 at halftime. And, you know, doing something like that is kind of like, to me, you bench Babe Ruth the 7th game of the World Series because he strikes out a lot. He also is the greatest home run hitter. I don't want to piss anybody off that likes Hank Aaron, but, you know, maybe the greatest home run hitter that can win the game for you hitting a home run. But all of a sudden you decide that him striking out is a bad thing and you're going to bench him for it. So you got to also learn how to use your players, surround yourself with good people, know how to identify what their talents are, and utilize them in the game. So that's an important part of your team too. But that's just a lot of stuff about team, about how to build team, how to tie it together, some things to do to help you bring it to your players. And we're going to talk ball then when the next thing's over, right? Okay, guys?
All right, thank you.
Guess we got a 10-minute break.